Job hunting in the UK is a nightmare, especially if you're not a native English speaker. And if you get to the position where you've got an interview for a job, you might find yourself feeling a little bit nervous, especially when it comes to your English. But don't worry, today I'm here to help you out. All right, mate, and welcome to the BritSpeakPod, the podcast designed to help you understand British life, British culture, and of course, British English. So let's get cracking. Hey up, mate, how you doing today? Yeah, I'm not too bad. Thanks for asking, and welcome to episode 18 of the BritSpeakPod, where today we're talking all about job interview questions and answers. I'm going to help you understand what you need to know if you're going for a job interview in the UK. But before we get into all that good stuff, if you're new around here, nice to meet you, mate. My name is Dan. Do me a favour, subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcast from. I'd appreciate it. And everybody else, if you're coming back, nice to see you again, mate. I hope you had a good week. So yeah, today, job interview questions. Now, every week, I'll get an email or a message on Instagram or something from somebody that's got a job interview in the UK and they are bricking it. Bricking it is British slang for being very, very nervous. And they're usually not that nervous about the job interview. You know, they're applying for jobs that they've already got experience in. The problem is the English, you know. They're nervous about their English and what kind of questions will they ask and how do I answer? And, you know, it's perfectly understandable to feel that way. So I thought today I'll try and go through like the 10 most common questions that you're going to get asked in an interview. And I'll kind of give an example answer, or at least something that you should be aware of if you're going to answer this question. Now, this is not guaranteed. You're not going to hear all of them, and it won't be every interview, but hopefully this will point you in the right direction. Right then, number one is tell me about yourself. This always happens at the beginning of an interview, and it's your chance to kind of go through your personal history. Now, don't go through everything. We don't need to know that you went skiing when you were 12 years old. It's not relevant, is it? We need to talk about stuff related to your job history that's relevant to the job you're applying for. You know, talk about what you've achieved, talk about the history of your employment, and finish up by explaining why you want this job. For example, maybe something like this. I've been a personal assistant for 8 years, helping different managers and departments. I like organising things and working efficiently. And now I'm ready for a more challenging role, like being the CEO's executive assistant. You know, I told them what I've been doing recently and why I'm good at it and what I want to do next. Pretty easy, right? Pretty easy. Next up, the question you might get is, how would you describe yourself? This is a question that's trying to work out what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses as a professional, right? It's also about self-awareness. Like, do you know your strengths and your weaknesses, and are you going to lie about it? So whatever you do, talk about what you're good at and give evidence why you're good at it. And don't just make stuff up. Don't be like, oh yeah, I'm fluent in 12 languages. Because if you're not, one day you might be in trouble, you know. So something like this. I consider myself a good leader. In my previous job, I took charge of a team that was struggling to meet the goals. I met with each member of the team, listened to their issues, and shared my ideas for improvement. We introduced some new ideas, and within 6 months, we consistently exceeded our targets. So I talked about, you know, I'm a good leader and gave some evidence why I'm a good leader and what happened because I did that. So yeah, always try and show one of your strengths and give evidence for it if they ask you that question. Next, what makes you unique? Now, probably in the interview, there's going to be 10, 15, even 50 people sometimes applying for the same job. But what makes you special? What makes you different to all the other people? And what makes you the best candidate? So one thing you have to do is kind of highlight experiences or talents that you've got that most other people might not have got. Maybe you've also worked in another kind of job and you've got some experience that will help, something that makes you different to everybody else. So, for example, maybe a good answer would be something like, what sets me apart is my mix of experience in sales and customer service. I've dealt with customers' issues and I understand their needs and concerns, and this helps me guide them effectively in sales discussions. So yeah, I'm showing that, sure, I'm good at sales, but I'm also good at customer service, and those two things go really well together, and that's why I'm the best one. Yeah, try and think a little bit outside the box and something else that you've done most other people might not have done and why it's good. Next, a question that you're always going to get is, why do you want to work here? And of course, the correct answer is money, but we don't say that to them. That's not a good answer to this question. I mean, that's the question that we ask ourselves. Why do I want to work here? The answer is money, but don't tell them that. This question is actually trying to find out, how much do you know about this company? Now, some people go to job interviews and they don't know anything about that company. They've applied for 50 jobs this month and they just go to all of them. They don't really care. But you're not like that. You're going to do some research before you go to that job interview. You're going to learn a little bit about the history of the company, the culture, what they're planning to do in the future, and you're going to show that you match what they're thinking. So, for example, I might say something like, I'm really excited about your company's goals of helping families manage their finances better. I personally understand these challenges from my own family's experience, and I'd love to assist others who have been through similar things. I'm kind of saying like, look, we've got the same idea, me and you. We're on the same page. So do some research in advance and then show that you're the same, basically. Good. Number 5 is a bit trickier, and that is, what motivates you? They want to find out if you're going to be enthusiastic about your job. Are you going to be engaged? Are you going to be motivated to actually show up to work and do your job every day? Some people are not, let's be fair. So you've got to show what motivates you and why you are going to be enthusiastic about this job. And once again, try and give real life examples of times that you felt really motivated at work. Something like, I don't know, I enjoy talking to people, especially when I can help them. In my role as a customer service advisor, I helped loads of customers resolve issues with their services. Once I guided a new customer through our online billing system, helping them to make payments and access her transaction history. I found it rewarding, and she was so pleased with my help that she even sent a letter to my boss to express her gratitude. That's completely made up, but something like that. Show that something in a previous job made you feel really good about doing the job and you were motivated, and kind of tell a story that highlights that. Good. Now, another question you might get is, how do you handle stress? Sometimes working is a stressful thing, There's loads of stress at work. And how do you handle it? So this could be, deadlines. It could be like something goes wrong, and for whatever reason, these things happen. But employers are looking for people that are not just going to give up when this happens. They're actually going to work hard to fix it, not just be like in corner crying because it doesn't work. So once again, you need to kind of show how you manage stress and reference some evidence, some story in your past where something stressful happened and how you overcame that stress. Maybe it's going to be something like, as an example, I had a project with a really strict deadline once. At first, it was really overwhelming. I didn't know what to do, but I took a step back and I broke it into smaller tasks, and I got some colleagues to help with some of them, which eased the pressure. I made a doable plan, and in the end, I met the deadline with a high quality result. Something like that might be quite a good answer. Now we're getting on to the more tricky end of the things, the questions they might ask you. Like, these ones are a bit trickier because they're a little more personal, a little more in-depth, and maybe more difficult to talk about. So, number 7. Why are you leaving your current job? Once again, the answer is probably money, but we can't say that. So we've got to come up with a better answer. Now, they usually ask this question because they want to know what you want in a new job, in a new workplace. And once again, you can't say money, so don't say money. But no matter what the reason you left your current job, maybe you got fired because you punched your boss in the face. Like, try and be positive about your experience. You need to be truthful, but maybe not the full truth. You know what I'm saying? So focus on your career goals, be positive about your previous employer, and think more about the future and what you want to achieve and why you think their company is good for that. Maybe something like this. Well, I'm searching for a job that lets me concentrate on creating lasting connections with clients. In my current position, we deal with quick sales, so I don't have the chance to build relationships. And I think building relationships is what I enjoy the most about my job. So that's why I think I'd be a great match for this role. My current job just does quick sales, and I'm better at long-term sales, so that's why I want to work for you. Something like that. It could be a bit tricky, especially if you left your job for some less than positive reasons. Try and be positive about it as much as you can. Next, they're always going to ask you this question, and it's a nightmare. It's always some variation of like, what are your goals for the future? Sometimes they'll ask you like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or something like that. It's always some variation of this question. And they're basically doing this to see if you're going to stick around. Are you going to be here for 3 months and then you're going to leave? Or are you going to be here for a long time? That's basically what they're trying to work out. Is it just a stepping stone in your career? Or is it, where you're going to build your house? That's what they're kind of asking. So even if you're not planning to make it your career, don't say that. Don't say, oh, well, I just need a job for 3 months, because they're not going to give it you. What you need to do is talk about your future and how their company aligns with it, even if that's not forever. For example, I could say something like, well, I'm aiming to develop my marketing skills and gain management experience in the coming years. I'm drawn to working for a company like yours because it offers exposure to new challenges and I can collaborate with different departments. And with the right guidance, I actually believe I could eventually end up being the manager of your marketing department. I'm not committing my life to that company, but I'm saying like, this is what I want to do. And I think you guys can give me some of the things that I need to be able to achieve that. Without saying, in 10 years, I'm going to be sat in your chair, mate. I'm going to take your job. I once said that in an interview, by the way. The guy said to me, he's like, Dan, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I said, in your job. And it might surprise you to know that I didn't get that job. So yeah, don't do that. Good. Nice. Number 9. They always ask this as well, yeah. Like, can you tell me about a time you overcame a difficult work situation? Now, this is kind of like a question where they're trying to get inside your head and how do you think? So there's actually a really common question. And there's a really easy way to answer it. And I'm going to help you understand it by giving you a word. And that word is STAR. STAR, star. So when you get a question like this, try and remember the word STAR because it helps you plan your answer. So S stands for situation. What was the situation? T stands for the task. What were you doing at the time? A stands for actions. What did you do? And R is the result. What happened? So S, situation, T, task, A, action, R, result. And if you can put that together, that's a great way to answer this question. For example, I once filled in for my manager when our top customer was unhappy with the performance. I couldn't get in touch with my manager because they were on holiday, so I directly contacted the client to discuss their concerns and what was going wrong. I created a plan to fix these issues, and I suggested a follow-up meeting when my manager was back in the office. When they returned, we could demonstrate the progress on the plan, and as a result, the customer doubled their next order. The situation, customer is unhappy. The task was contact the customer and see why they're unhappy. The action, we made a plan based on what they said, and the result is they gave us more money. Boom, star, fixed. So yeah, try and think of that. If that's the only thing you remember in this episode, STAR is a great way of answering this kind of question. Now, there are loads of other questions they may ask you in an interview like this, and I don't have time to go through all of them. Maybe I'll do a follow-up episode in the future if people are into it. But one question they always ask, and it's an annoying question. But that question is, so, do you have any questions for me? I used to hate it when people ask me this question. Because no, I don't. I've read your website. I know what's going on. But you can't really say no. It's like, do you have any questions for me? No. Oh, okay. So you're not interested. You need to show a bit of interest, right? So this is a chance for you to show how interested you are by asking questions to the person who's doing the interview. And don't just be like, do you like your job? It's not very specific, is it? You need to be quite specific in your questions. And it's also a way of showing that, look, I've done my own work. I know what's going on. So you can ask things like, your company did really well last year. Are you planning to expand? Shows that, I know you guys did well last year. Or it could be something like, what kind of career path is available to somebody that joins your company? Showing that you're interested in the future, right? Or do you have any employee health schemes, such as a gym membership? Maybe you're interested in something like that. Always write down 2 or 3 questions before you go in the interview so you've got something prepared in case they ask you this question, because the worst thing you can do is be like, no, not really. Make sure you've got a question to ask if they ask you if you've got any questions. And that rounds up 10 questions probably going to get asked in an interview. Now, that's quite tricky for me because I'm not the most professional person in the world. And it's hard for me to be professional sometimes. I told you the story in the interview when I told the guy I wanted to take his job. So I'm not exactly the world's best interviewer, but hopefully that will at least help you with the English side of things. I'm sure you're more professional than I am. But at least this will give you some tips and some strategies, maybe some example answers for questions that you're quite likely to get asked in an interview. But yeah, good stuff. I'd like to know from you guys, especially if you're listening on Spotify, leave me a comment. What are some questions that you've been asked in job interviews, and what did you say? I'd love to know. And it'd be good to share the knowledge with anybody else that's listening. It's a community thing. So maybe you've been asked some questions that I haven't talked about today, and you can help us out. That'd be amazing. So yeah, that was my 10 most asked job interview questions and examples podcast episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've got a mate that's going for a job interview, send them this. Maybe it'll help them land the job. Yeah, other than that, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcast from, or you can go to britspeak.co/BritSpeakPod, and you'll never miss an episode. But that's it for today. That's it for this episode, and I'll catch you in the next one. See you there.